Immersive Sports Science. Content not commentary. Sports science, not bro science. Because at Immersive Sports Science we go deep on the science, I recommend you go to these times point synopses for the short review.
Hey everybody, I'm Matthew.
Hello guys, welcome back to Immersive Sports Science, and today we're going to be talking about the documentary Formula 1 series, Drive to Survive. Now you may notice that this video is not as long as my normal reviews, because there isn't really much to say. This is Adam McCarthy and I will see you in the next one. Bye! However, there are 3 scientific principles we can really look at from Drive to Survive, which they did show, although I would potentially argue they could have gone in far much more detail than they did. But then I got to remind myself, this is not sports science documentary. Formula 1 Drive to Survive follows the F1 teams, all of them, and all 20 drivers as they compete throughout the season in the 2018, 2019 and 2020 season of each series respectively. The documentary showed each major incident, or what they perceived to be the major incident, as well as the daily life of an F1 driver and being a member of an F1 team. The first point I'm going to mention is the training needed to become a Formula 1 driver, and I'm not necessarily going to talk about the in-the-car training. We're going to talk about the pure strength and conditioning. In motorsport, being fit is vitally important. In motorsport, due to perhaps the lack of empirical evidence, it's not always clear what fitness training is required or what roles specific fitness components play, particularly outside of the elite F1 level. Consequently, drivers and their trainers are often left to their own devices, placing reliance on anecdotal evidence. What are the needs and demands of the driver? Well, for starters, they have to be light, relatively light. Therefore, they do a lot of cardio to engage this. The reason why they need to be light is because if a car is heavier, then potentially the slower it will drive. But weight maintenance can be achieved as long as you're reaching a caloric balance, regardless of the type of exercise you do. Cardio, or cardiovascular exercise, basically means exercise of the heart, and contrary to common belief, does not necessarily mean weight loss. During a 2-hour race, an F1 driver's blood pressure will often increase up to 50%. Therefore, they need to have a strong heart. A driver also needs to do a number of core and neck-based strength exercises in order to withstand G-force, but also to help turn the car, because a driver utilizes their core in order to help them steer the car. Driver would also need fast, quick reaction in order to help them drive and help them to perform better. It also helps with their concentration. A driver needs to concentrate for very long periods of time, and one important part of this is hydration. Keeping hydrated helps with your concentration levels. Red Bull has found out in other formulas of motor racing, especially amongst the Australian Grand Prix, that a motor racing driver can potentially lose up to 2 kilograms in water, which ironically the parent company Red Bull is a caffeinated carbonated drink that potentially dehydrates the body. But how does all this training help an F1 driver specifically in a specific program is very much unclear at this present moment in time, especially regarding warming up to compete. Each driver has their own pre-practice, qualifying and race preparation that is unique to them. Even drivers in the same team will have their own unique warm-up and prep preparation. This gets the driver in the correct mindset to race. It is also good practice and good health and fitness for every other member to keep a good modicum of fitness, as this may also help their performance.
Fitness to compete in F1 revolves around many different factors, many interpersonal factors, and although we don't have strong evidence as of to date that any of this actually works, we can make accurate predictions that they do work because of other fields such as fighter pilots and other areas of sport. And we know from the science in those sports that the likelihood that these scientific principles will work in Formula 1 is strong. What they try and do is to periodize their athletes' training program, in this case the drivers and the pit crews, to work best and to peak at the right time, that being during the Formula 1 season, but also towards the end of the season where points matter most. So I'm probably going to draw cause from causality here. In other words, we can't necessarily say that any of these changes equate to faster performances, because there are a whole host of other mechanical factors that interact and partake in whether that is true or not, and it makes it a little bit convoluted. Take a look at Red Bull's 1.9 second pit stops as an example. There is a vast improvement in their tyre changing times. Now, I can't necessarily relate this to them actually being fitter, but we know if it works. So if anything can give you an incremental change, Why not do it?
We are now going to talk about the cutthroat nature of F1 and what it takes to have a seat in F1, or to be, in some cases, the forgotten men, the people who are forgotten, the engineers, and the engineers back home, what it takes for them to remain in that team. Now it's time for some home truths. The chances of you becoming a Formula 1 driver is close to 0%. When I mean 0%, I'm talking about 0.1%. Got a greater chance of becoming a Premier League football player at 0.5%, or even participating in the NFL at 2.7%, providing that you've gone to an American college. However, if this is your dream, my advice would be to go for it and do the best you can, because you've only got one life and you only got one chance. So you might as well try and make it happen.
I mean, I heard from replacing Brenner, all those things. What do you think about those things?
It's part of the game, part of F1, and that during that silly season somehow. No prediction for now. This weekend, let's perform. It's always the most important is you need to perform, then you're attractive and sexy.
And this leads quite nicely into the psychology of camaraderie and communication you must have to be in the top of the sport, to be in F1. When a team is built, 4 processes usually happen. Firstly, the team forms. They try and get to know each other. Then you get norming. The processes of norming becomes apparent. What each member's role within that team, both emotionally, socially, as well as organisational roles. For instance, the team principal is going to be the head honcho, so therefore his role is organisational. However, he or she may not necessarily get along with the people in the team. That he might take a step back, or she might take a step back, and thusly may not necessarily be the most important person from a social perspective, and that can help or hinder a team's progress just through their sheer personality or inability to connect with the team, or an ability to connect to the team. You then get this concept of storming. Arguments come out to play, and the relationships become either restricted, or there comes some kind of tension as people fight for different roles. This can be passive aggressively, or this can come out into the forefront in the more aggressive response. Likewise, after a while, these roles become normal and you get less infighting. Otherwise, the team breaks down, or the team operates dysfunctionally. And then you get performing. Once all that goes out of the way, the performance happens and you allow the team to perform. You find each other's role that best fits, and you get the team to work to its best, with each member operating at the best of their abilities. But this understanding or concepts of how teams form is too simplistic, and not all teams form like this. Now, there are many ways in which we connect with people within a team. After all, there is no I in team. However, the individual themselves plays a part within that team, and they have interconnections with each other's members. Different forms of connections with them, emotional connections usually. These connection bonds can be strong, they can be weak, but you have a relationship with someone within that team. Likewise, the engineers back at home are going to have a different connection between each other than the engineers down on the racetrack themselves. The best way to describe it, really, our connections with each other, is like an interconnecting web. A web of ideas, emotions, feelings, personalities that all intermix. And although we try and react professional, they will help or hinder that team's performance, or sometimes even just allow the team to operate. Sometimes these webs act like a 3D web, multiplanar. In other words, that you come and they all interlink and connect together. Sometimes you have different ones. Here's one web, the guys at the home. Here's another web, the engineers actually on the track day. Sometimes they connect, sometimes they're singular. Maybe it's one member from that interconnect, but that individual member has their own web. And people will perceive each other's roles differently, and how they operate within their roles will be individual to everyone. This can also hinder or help performance. Drive to Survive is a minimalist documentary outside of the races itself, which focuses on a simple narrative and storyline, with each episode focused on either a team, a situation, or a driver.
I remember as a kid, I could hear the echo through the city. It's like this scream.
The documentary utilises a modern minimalist feel with its use of font that appeals to an Instagram generation, and can also be seen on such publications as My Free Sports magazine, with the heavy use of block open sans font. with the picture, in this case being the Formula 1 drivers themselves in their daily lives as well as what the teams are doing, telling the actual story. This is contrasted with the actual racing, which seems to be over dramatised at certain situations and extents, which is fast paced and is as far from sporting modern minimalism as you can get. The graphics were sparingly used and were very modern techno, which we've become used to in the 21st century, though they probably didn't actually necessarily need to be there. There is also no bumper, that being there are no credits to the introduction. Usually on a series they have their own opening graphics, which this film series documentary doesn't have. Instead, each episode has its own previous section, as well as a prelude. Then it finishes with the Formula 1 car driving away, showing the graphics of the Formula 1 Drive to Survive. This is iconic to the series, and not too dissimilar to how to structure a YouTube video, just more cinematic. Netflix's Drive to Survive is an interesting documentary to a certain audience. However, the amount of memes from the racing community that resulted from the way Netflix and Formula 1 edited Drive to Survive shows that it has very little journalistic value. From wrong drivers' names and overly dramatised events like the Roman Grosjean crash, which left a bad taste in people's mouths, to the omission of some seriously interesting and season-defining moments, such as George Russell's massively unlucky day in Sakar, which he had to forfeit pole position in the Mercedes car, to which he was a replacement driver for Hamilton, after they stuck Bottas's tyre on his car, as well as team radios being shifted to not only one corner to another, but as far as taking radios from completely different seasons. The purpose of Drive to Survive is to help bring in new fans to the sport, specifically younger teenage fans, and in that respect it is a major success. However, I struggle to see that selling these new fans a lie is serving the sport well. If the sport was good enough, you would not need to fabricate this drama. But importantly, if Netflix did their job well, they would have enough drama from the races. In other words, you do not need to alter the chronology of the events to manufacture drama if the sport itself is exciting. However, with Netflix's purpose being that of entertainment, we should just take the series at face value and enjoy it for what it is: entertainment. All in all, I give Drive to Survive a KSA score of 88.